as basic structure doctrine of the Constitution. The basic structure doctrine was came into existence in the Keshavarti judgment around 48 years ago on 24th April. We will be celebrating like 48 years after a week. So it has been applied in various number of significant cases and applied as a venerated by the judicial minds in different number of cases. The doctrine limits the amending power of the parliament to as it's mentioned that there are implied restrictions on the power of the parliament to amend the constitution. Though it is not explicitly mentioned that where the parliament can amend the constitution, it is for the courts to decide as to when whether a constitutional amendment will be a violative of basic structure doctrine or not. So court have on various time to time decided whether a constitutional amendment is violative of basic structure doctrine or not. So to have more detailed discussion on the topic today, we have with us Dr. Yogesh Pratap sir. Sir has done his LLM from National Law University School of National Law School of India University, Bangalore. His doctoral thesis, Contribution of Dissenting Opinions of Indian Supreme Court Judges, a Critical Evaluation, is recognized as a significant contribution in understanding the voting patterns in the Supreme Court of India. This work was later published as a book titled Judicial Dissent and Indian Supreme Court, Enriching Constitutional Dissent Discourse. Later, Honorable Justice Dr. D.Y. Chandrachud authored a scholastic foreword for this book. Sir has served as a Deputy Registrar Research in the Supreme Court of India. Sir has also served as a Vice Chancellor in charge of National Law University, Odisha. He is currently the Registrar of National Law University, Odisha. I will welcome him on behalf of the Society for Constitutional Law and Human Rights and like to give the floor to him.
Thank you. I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Ashutosh. Thank you, the School of Law, UPAS, Dehradun, for asking me to discuss some aspect of doctrine of basic structure, which is one of the biggest contribution made by Indian Supreme Court till now, in my opinion. The doctrine of basic structure has a very rich and I would say surcharged political background, where we find the conflict between Parliament and the Supreme Court. This was a power struggle which started right from 1950, the moment Constitution was implemented and the first constitutional amendment was passed. But if you see the background, I think briefly we have to see the purpose and the objective for which we drafted a constitution, a written constitution. We claim that we have a normative constitution, we have a controlling constitution. And there is no doubt that we have one of the best constitutions of the world. There may be problems in the execution. And this was one of the apprehensions raised both by Dr. Rajendra Prasad and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, that we can draft even better constitution or maybe best constitution sometime. But if people who are going to administer this constitution, if they are not good, the constitution will fail. And probably the problem lies in the implementation of the constitution. Problem lies with us, the people who are administering this constitution. And that's why I said that we have to see the purpose for which we need a constitution. A constitution as an instrumentality of power control, a document which guides the state. Mankind, since antiquity, has pondered the problem of how to reconcile the need for order an authority in the society with the desire of ensuring fundamental rights or individual liberty. Alexander Hamilton, he writes its very famous lines in the Federalist. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the greatest difficulty lies in this: you must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, mobilize it to control itself. It took political man many centuries to realize that the good society in which he purchased rights and in which these rights were secured was conditioned on the containment of the power holders, whatever the legitimation, factual, religious, or legal, of their social control. In time, this purpose appeared to be served best by articulating restraint society wished to place on the power holders in the form of a set fixed rule, the constitution, limiting their exercise of political power. What is the constitution? A constitution is perceived as a document that ought to strike a delicate balance between, on one hand, governmental power to accomplish the great ends of civil society, and on the other, individual liberty. As James Madison put it in the Federalist Papers, that if men were angels, no government would be necessary. But unfortunately, we are not angels. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. The Constitution, therefore, became a basic instrumentality of the control of political power process. And this desire to articulate and formalize the basic ordering of the society in a written constitution, in a written document called Constitution, is very old. And this was in opposition to the claim of absolute and unlimited authority of the parliament. It was in the 17th century and more insistently the 18th century that under the power the stimulation of the social contract concept, the concept constitution assumed its modern understanding. It signified a document containing all the fundamentals of the state society and infused in its specific telos a design to curb the arbitrariness of single power holder, though not an individual person, an absolute monarch, and made them subject to clear restrictions and limitations. It was only for this purpose the monolithic sovereignty was divided into different segments or departments, to each of which a specific state activity was assigned, because of differentiation or specialization of state functions. So we demarcated three major departments, like legislature will make the law. This is a specialized function. Executive will execute the law. Again, a specialized function. And there will be an institution for adjudication, dispute resolution. Again, a specialized function. To this, we added another correlative, that each department should exercise the functions assigned to it independently from the others. And this was called principle of functional independence. Functional independence. So principle of differentiation or specialization of a state function and principle of functional independence. These two were the two basic fundamental principles on which the modern constitution was evolved. The modern written constitution was evolved. The organic unity of the state then was achieved by combining these specialized and autonomous power holders in joint action for the formation of a will society. Now you have to work together. It is not this was also visualized, and this was also thought, that whether we can have a rigid separation of power, a rigid compartments like legislature, executive, and judiciary. But the rigid compartment, it was found that this will not succeed. And if we have to achieve certain goals, which generally we fix in our constitution in the preamble, then sometime we have to work together. Sometime we have to incorporate certain mechanism where we can have a checks and balances on each other. So doctrine of checks and balances was also evolved. And these principles were not evolved automatically or all of a sudden. These principles were evolved slowly by trial and error, experiment basis. But after the vast experimentation of the English, American, and French revolutions, constitutional experience reached to the stage where there could be an agreement on certain minimum requirements of any formalized constitutional order. So after these experiences, English, American, and French Revolution, we reached to this stage where we can say that these are the certain essential ingredients which we must have in a controlling constitutional order. What are these basic minimums? Differentiation of various state functions so that we can avoid concentration of power in the single hand. There should be a planned mechanism for cooperation of several power holders, checks and balances, familiar to American and French constitutional principles. There should be a mechanism likewise planned in advance for avoiding deadlocks between the several autonomous power holders. There should be a method also planned in advance for peacefully adjusting the fundamental order to the changing socio-political conditions. The rational method of constitutional amendment in order to avoid the resort to illegality, violence, and revolution. So this was one of the minimum parameter, essential ingredient which was agreed that we must have when we are going to adopt a formalized system, constitutional order. We must have a mechanism for peacefully adjusting the fundamental order to the changing socio-political conditions, so that we can change our constitution, because constitution is not made for one generation. Constitution is made for generations to come. And all these features which you find in these progressive constitutions like United States were incorporated in our constitution also. So the telos of any normative constitution in ontological sense. When I say ontological sense, it means we focus more on the functional aspect, how constitution is functioning in reality. So the telos must be seen in the devices, articulation of devices which controls the governmental power, political power. And this whole idea was called as constitutionalism. This philosophy was called constitutionalism, which means that all powers rest on the understanding that it will be exercised according to commonly accepted principles, according to constitution, because constitution is the primary document where we have agreed that these are the commonly acceptable principle, whether it is fundamental rights, whether it is directive principles of a state policy, or any other principle given in the constitution. So constitutionalism is the sense of constitution. And this has one essential quality, that is legal limitation on government, legal limitation on the political power. The fundamental value that constitutionalism protects is human dignity, liberty. So Indian Constitution was also based on this liberal ideology of constitutionalism. All powers are limited. In fact, when we study constitution, when I study constitution and I discuss constitution with my students, I discuss only from this perspective, constitution from the perspective of power, from the perspective of power controlling device. So in a normative constitution, controlling constitution, all powers are limited, whether it is expressly mentioned in the constitution or it is expressly not mentioned in the constitution. If constitution like United States, very precise, you can even count the words of American Constitution. But Indian Constitution was a very detailed one. And the purpose for making it a detailed constitution was, the intention of the drafters was to make it black and white, that all the powers are limited. But in spite of that, this is humanly not possible, that you write everything in the constitution. Constitution should contain minimum, and that's why American Constitution, the original constitution, first constitution, is very precise, very limited. It should contain minimum. But the intention of the drafters was very clear, that we will give powers and we will also provide restrictions and limitations on these powers, so that this would avoid any kind of conflict, any kind of confusion in future. So when we get this question, whether Parliament's power to amend the constitution is unlimited and absolute, what should be your answer? My answer is no. In a written constitution, in a normative constitution, in a controlling constitution, absolute power, the concept of absolute power does not exist. All powers are limited. All powers are guided. But Supreme Court took 23 years to finally declare that parliament's or government's power. Sometime I will use this word parliament and government interchangeably, because we have adopted Westminster model, and Westminster model, sometime we find a fusion of governmental executive power and legislative power. We don't find a rigid separation between executive and legislature in Westminster model. So Supreme Court took 23 years to finally conclude that no, the power to amend the constitution given by the constitution is also a limited power. It cannot be absolute. There is nothing like absolute power in the constitution. Very, 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 very clear. So is there any restriction on Parliament's power of amending the constitution? Yes. Then what is that limitation, and how this limitation will be exercised? This question was raised immediately after the commencement of the constitution, when first amendment was made and it was brought to the scrutiny of the Supreme Court. I will not go into the background of the first constitutional amendment, why this constitutional amendment was made, because Supreme Court was again up to a certain extent responsible for first Constitutional Amendment Act also. The first Constitutional Amendment Act added Article 31 capital A and 31 capital B in the Constitution. And a 9th schedule was also added in the Constitution with the precise purpose that if a law is passed by any legislature, and if a law is put in the 9th schedule, then it will be immune from judicial review. It cannot be challenged on the ground that this violates my fundamental rights. And the constitutional validity of this was challenged in Shankari Prasad Singh Dev versus Union of India. It was contended by the petitioner that though it may be open for the Parliament to amend the provisions in respect of fundamental rights, the amendments would have to be tested in the light of Article 13, Clause 2 of the Constitution. 13 Clause 2 of the Constitution says the state shall not make any law which takes away or abuses fundamental rights. 13.2 is the source of judicial review power. Supreme Court unanimously, 5-judge bench, rejected the contention that insofar as First Amendment took away or abridged the fundamental right conferred by Part 3, the fundamental rights, the relationship between Article 13, Clause 2 and Article 368, we have to see. Article 13, Clause 2 says that the state shall not make any law which takes away fundamental right. And the definition of law is also given by Article 13, which provides a illustrative definition that law means and includes. But this definition does not mention anywhere Constitutional Amendment Act. The argument of the petitioner was that because this is illustrative definition, the Supreme Court has the liberty to expand the meaning. And if you expand the meaning, it will include even Constitutional Amendment Act. And if it includes Constitutional Amendment Act, that then Parliament cannot make any amendment in the Constitution which restricts, violates, or abridges fundamental rights. But this argument was rejected by the Supreme Court, 5-judge bench in Sankari Prasad Singh case. Justice Patanjali Sastry, he said that it appears prima facie that law include constitutional amendment, because Constitutional Amendment Act is also a law. But we have to make it very clear that there is a distinction between ordinary law and constitutional law. Ordinary law is made under Article 245 to 46, read with Schedule 7 of the Constitution. And constitutional law, constitutional amendment is made in exercise of a kind of sovereign power or constituent power which is given under Article 368 of the Constitution. The judges, probably they were influenced by Dicey's writing on the sovereign power of the state, which was also quoted by Justice Patanjali Sastry in the majority judgment. The terms of Article 368 are perfectly general and empower the Parliament to amend the Constitution without any exception whatsoever. So there is no restriction on Article 368 that it cannot amend fundamental right. This power is plenary power. This power is sovereign power. The definition of law given under Article 13 and the scope of Article 13 is confined to ordinary law and subordinate legislation, not for Constitutional Amendment Act. And therefore, Article 13, Clause 2 will not affect Constitutional Amendments Act made under Article 368 of the Constitution. Get the point? So in fact, in conclusion, the 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court agreed that Article 368 power is a kind of sovereign power, plenary power, absolute power, which is not limited in any sense. This was the feeling given by the Supreme Court in Sankari Prasad Singh versus Union of India. Now this matter was again brought to the Supreme Court in another case, and this was again with respect to 9th schedule. Certain laws were passed by state legislatures to bring agrarian reforms, land reforms in their respective states, and these laws were put in the 9th schedule so that immunity can be provided from judicial review. Nobody can challenge these laws. And this was done by 17th Constitutional Amendment Act. And the 17th validity of 17th Constitutional Amendment was again challenged in very famous case, Sajjan Singh versus State of Rajasthan. Sajjan Singh versus State of Rajasthan. On similar grounds, as we find in Sankari Prasad Singh case, the government was relying on Sankari Prasad Singh ruling because you have now precedent which has recognized the power of the Parliament, power of the Union government, absolute power of the Union government to amend the Constitution, including the chapter of fundamental rights. But again, this Constitution bench, the 3 judges The majority opinion was given by Chief Justice Gajendra Gadkar, and 2 judges wrote concurring opinion. The majority, 3 judges, agreed with the reasoning given by the Sankari Prasad bench. And they said that the words amendment of this constitution in Article 368 plainly and unambiguously meant amendment of all the provisions of the constitution. And therefore, it would be unreasonable to hold that word law in Article 13, Clause 2 also include constitutional amendment acts, because if we interpret like this, then Parliament will be handicapped. Parliament will be deprived of the power to amend Part 3 of the Constitution. They went on to the point that even if assuming that power to amend the fundamental rights were not included in Article 368, Parliament can, by a suitable amendment, can include. This can be amended, and Parliament can include that even fundamental right chapter can be amended in exercise of 368 power. But the highlight of this case was not the majority opinion. The highlight of this case was the 2 concurring opinions. Friends, concurring opinion, we find in Constitution, there is a provision, Article 145, which allows our judges to write their individual opinion, which may be concurring, which may be dissenting. Concurring opinion, the meaning is when you agree with the conclusion, but you offer your own regions, different regions. Dissenting means you don't agree with the conclusion and you are giving a different regions altogether. But even if you see concurring opinions, you will find various kinds of concurring opinion. And this concurring opinion in Sajjan Singh case, Sajjan Singh versus State of Rajasthan, was a very peculiar, very specific, special kind of concurrence. This was the concurrence which raises doubts on the majority. So this concurrence was very close to dissenting opinion. But still it was concurring because they agreed, these 2 judges, Justice Hidayatullah and Justice Madholkar, they agreed with the 3 judges majority led by Justice Gajendra Gadkar that 17th constitutional amendment is valid. So in conclusion, they agreed, but they raised serious doubts on the reasonings given by majority and also the majority reasoning given by Supreme Court in Sankari Prasad Singh Deo case. Justice Hidayatullah, he says that I require stronger regions. I need stronger regions than those given in that case by majority to make me accept the view that fundamental rights were not really fundamental, but were intended to be within the power of the amendment in the common with other parts of the Constitution. The fundamental rights for which we fought this entire freedom struggle if this is the value of fundamental right, that this is at par with any other provision of the Constitution, which can be amended by Parliament by a simply special majority. Even 2/3 ratification by half of the state is also not required. The Constitution gives so many assurances in Part 3, and it would be difficult to think that they were a plaything in the hands of a special majority. This was the phrase used by Justice Hidayatullah. That if we accept this reasoning of majority Justice Gadendra Gadkar and Sankari Prasad, then fundamental rights will be nothing but a plaything in the hands of majority, special majority, a government with a special majority, a government having majority in Lok Sabha and government having majority in upper house. And you know the situation of the president, head of the state, whose signature is also required. You can make any amendment in the Constitution. So it will be a plaything in the hands of majority. Justice Madholkar, first time this idea was given in this case, Sajjan Singh versus State of Rajasthan, where Justice Madholkar says that there are certain fundamental features of the Constitution which cannot be changed. Each and every constitution of the world has certain fundamental features, and these features must be preserved. And this was the impact of these two strong concurring opinions, raising doubts on the majority opinion, that the same issue, same question. What was the question before Sajjan Singh bench? Constitutional validity of 17th Constitutional Amendment Act. This question was again referred to a larger bench. This was happening for the first time in the Supreme Court. So this issue was again referred to a larger bench, 11-judge bench in Golaknath versus State of Punjab. Some scholars say that the origin of this basic structure doctrine was influenced by a German scholar, Dietrich Conrad, Dietrich Conrad, Professor Conrad. He wrote a paper, he delivered a talk also in 1965 in Banaras Hindu University, and the title of his discussion was Implied Limitation on the Amending Power. And this was a very difficult time. This was a very difficult time in terms of this power struggle, power tussle between Supreme Court and the government. When this Golaknath case was being heard, and the 17th Constitutional Amendment was again re-examined by the Supreme Court in Golaknath case. And you know the history, the Golaknath, relying on these two judges, Justice Hidayatullah and Justice Madholkar, German professor's article, they completely overturned earlier two decisions, Sankari Prasad and Sajjan Singh. The majority in Golaknath, led by Justice Subba Rao, very upright, very famous judge, Koka Subba Rao, he held that fundamental rights were not amendable under Article 368. These rights are inviolable rights beyond the reach of all Parliament. Article 368 only provides procedure to amend the constitution, not substantive power is not conferred on the parliament by Article 368, because the original Article 368, if you see, you will find the marginal note. Marginal note only provided procedure to amend constitution. So marginal note was given emphasis, and Justice Subba Rao said that it only provides procedure. Substantive power you have to derive from some other provision. Then what is the other provision? The only provision, lawmaking power other than 368 is given under Article 245 to onwards, 245, 246, 247, 248. That is ordinary legislative power. But then this question was asked from the bench that if you suggest that this is ordinary legislative power, that there must be some entry in the Schedule 7, either in the union list or in the concurrent list. Because ordinary legislative power we have to read with Schedule 7. The subject must be there, but we don't find any subject like amendment of the Constitution in Schedule 7, either in union list or in the concurrent list. But this was also suggested, resolved by Justice Subba Rao. He said that there is a residuary clause and there is a residuary entry 97 of the union list, read with Article 248. So if a subject is not mentioned in any of these lists, it will go with the union. Very, very bizarre argument. Amendment for which there is a specific part in the Constitution for one article, only Article 368. Do you think that this was a subject for which the drafters of the Constitution would have forgotten to mention in the schedule? Because residuary entry is mentioned for those subjects which the drafters, they could not anticipate at that particular time. Amendment was not a subject of that kind which the drafters would have forgotten. So this Supreme Court majority was stretching the argument, but this was done in good faith, keeping in mind the background. Justice Subba Rao also held that Article 13, Clause 2 includes constitutional amendment. The word law includes Constitutional Amendment Act, and therefore Parliament cannot even touch fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are forbidden territory. But how will you amend fundamental rights? Suppose this question was also asked. If the whole country demands that there should be a change in fundamental right, and now you are suggesting that fundamental rights cannot be amended, that how fundamental right will be changed? Justice Subba Rao gave another surprising argument, logic. He said that this can be done only by Constituent Assembly. So you have to recall the Constituent Assembly. A new problem. How will you recall the Constituent Assembly? That power is also not given in the Constitution. Nowhere it is mentioned that the Constituent Assembly which was dissolved can also be reconstituted or can be recalled. This was not even imagined by the drafters of the Constitution. Again, bizarre argument, logic, that you can use your power under Article 248, residuary power, and you can recall the Constituent Assembly. And that Constituent Assembly can amend fundamental rights. But this Parliament in exercise of power, there is no power in 368. Procedure is similar to ordinary lawmaking power. The only difference is you need ratification by half of the state in certain amendments, certain cases. Cannot amend the fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are immune from amendment. Political judgment, arguments, which Justice Subba Rao later accepted also in some private conversation, that I knew that this is too much. But we wanted to stop the unruly horse government, the kind of amendments, the number of amendments were made in the constitution by government. We wanted to stop them. And he was successful in that. He was successful. The government was scared. To neutralize the effect of Golaknath, a private member bill was introduced immediately, but it was not accepted. Later, Parliament passed 24th Constitutional Amendment Act to overcome the difficulties created by 11-judge bench. Article 13, Clause 4 was inserted. So wherever they mention problem, all provisions were changed. First was the marginal note of Article 368, which said that procedure to amend the constitution. This was changed and this was made power to amend the constitution and procedure therefore. So power was added in the marginal note. There was also a discussion that this is not a constituent power, this is ordinary power, which you have to derive from Article 248. So word constituent power was also mentioned in Article 368. Supreme Court said that Article 368 will be subject to Article 13. So a clause in 13 was also added, 13 Clause 4. Nothing in this article shall apply to amendment made under Article 368. Itne se kaam ho jata, but I said that the government was very scared. So they wanted that there should not be any doubt. So a similar clause was added in Article 368 also. Nothing in Article 13 shall apply to amendment made under this article. एक से काम हो जाता है, चाहे यहाँ लिख दो, चाहे वहाँ लिख दो. But ये उनका आप डर देखिए, खौफ सुप्रीम कोर्ट का. And to avoid any kind of confusion, separate clauses were added in both the articles. Now this will also be challenged, and it was challenged in Supreme Court. And finally, we reached to the 13-judge bench constituted by the Supreme Court in Keshavanand Bharti versus State of Kerala. Constitutional validity of 24th Constitutional Amendment Act. 25th, 26th, 29th were also challenged, but we will not discuss those. We'll confine to Article 368 and 24th Constitutional Amendment Act, or you can say reconsideration of 11-judge bench verdict in Golaknath case was given to 13-judge bench in Keshavanand Bharti versus State of Kerala, or we popularly call it fundamental rights case. And finally, the Supreme Court, with a very confusing thin majority evolved this doctrine, built the superstructure of basic structure on the foundation which was created by Justice Madhulkar and Justice Hidayatullah and the German professor, Professor Conrad. These two judges and the professor, both, all the three, they warned that we ought to be mindful of the potential consequences which are inherent in granting Parliament limitless power to amend the Constitution. If we grant Parliament or government limitless, unlimited power to amend the Constitution, what could be the possible consequences? How we might react if the legislature were to amend Article 1, for example, by dividing India into two. Could a constitutional amendment abolish Article 21 to remove the guarantee of right to life? Could Parliament use its power to abolish the Constitution and reintroduce a new Constitution, new rule altogether, new regime altogether? Or can we say that we'll adopt the Mughal regime or the system which was prevalent in England? If a government comes with majority, thumping majority in both the houses, and we have that kind of situation, Nehruji enjoyed majority in both the houses, Indira ji enjoyed majority in both the houses, they had government in more than half of the states. Modi ji is also enjoying the same privilege. In that situation, if some government wants, and this is not completely unjustified, because some governments right from the beginning, they are saying Article 29 and 30 of the Constitution is a kind of appeasement to the minorities. And if this kind of government comes to power, can they repeal Article 29 and 30 of the Constitution? They have all the luxury. They have majority in Lok Sabha. You know how laws are passed now. In 5-6 hours, you will debate and you will pass the law. In 3 to 4 hours, you can pass the law in the upper house also. President of India will not even think twice to sign the bill. If allowed, he will come to the PMO and he will sign the bill. And if ratification by half of the state is also required, the government can easily get ratification. So the potential danger involved in this unlimited power of amendment, that they can rewrite the Constitution, they can change the Constitution, they can replace the system. But this was not the idea. The idea was that it was implicit in the concept of written Constitution that all powers are defined and all powers are limited. The doctrine of implied limitation, which was emphasized by the German professor and the two judges in Sajjan Singh versus State of Rajasthan, finally provided a kind of legitimization of doctrine of basic structure of the Constitution. This doctrine of basic structure was criticized, that there is no constitutional basis textually, it is not justified. The Supreme Court should interpret the text of the Constitution. You cannot, Supreme Court should not rewrite, cannot give altogether different meaning. And some of the scholars, some of the judges, they criticize this basic structure doctrine that this lacks textual basis. But I find textual justification also. I find contextual justification also. If you see Article 368 of the Constitution clearly, if you read, and I request all the students, whenever I discuss Constitution, I request to read the provisions of the Constitution very carefully. So many times. Every time you read provision, you will find a new clarity. And if you read Article 368 of the Constitution, you will find a phrase called this Constitution. This Constitution. Notwithstanding anything in this Constitution, and the Constitution shall stand amended. These two phrases provides textual basis, foundation for the basic structure doctrine. What is the meaning of this Constitution? And the Constitution, this Constitution shall stand amended. This makes it sufficiently clear that after making amendment in the Constitution, in the remainder, in the residue, the remainder which is left, ठीक है, आप कर लीजिए, जो amendment आपको करना है कर लीजिए, including part 3. We are not denying, Supreme Court accepted. That's why I said that it should be a balance between individual liberty and governmental power. So Supreme Court also tried to balance harmonious construction. That you make amendment, we are not denying your power to amend the Constitution, and you have power to amend all parts of the Constitution, including fundamental rights. But the residue which is left after this amendment must be this Constitution which was drafted by the Constituent Assembly. It means you cannot rewrite the Constitution. If you rewrite the Constitution, that will not be a Constitution drafted by Dr. Ambedkar's drafting committee. It means there are certain basic features. It means there are certain principles. It means there are certain things which makes this Constitution a different kind of Constitution that cannot be changed. That fundamentals cannot be altered, because people will not recognize then this Constitution as the Constitution, the same Constitution which was drafted by the Dr. Ambedkar's drafting committee. And this understanding is also sustained by the literal meaning of word amendment, which means a minor change or addition designed to improve a text. So literal meaning of word amendment would also substantiate this argument, this logic. Amendment is not to destroy. Amendment is not to rewrite. So you cannot exercise your power under Article 368 and you rewrite the Constitution. You cannot make this Constitution a Hindu Rashtra or a Constitution for the Hindus. Therefore, for an amendment to be constitutionally valid, the constitution that remains after amendment must be the Constitution of India with all those essential features which were present at the time of its conception. I'm not saying that this doctrine did not have any problem. The problem with this doctrine, but primarily, I feel that this doctrine was in consonance with the larger picture, larger doctrine of constitutionalism. At the beginning, we said that when we say that we have a written constitution, when we have a normative constitution, the moment this concept of absolute power, unfettered power, unlimited power disappears, does not exist. So parliament cannot, government cannot claim that we have unlimited power under Article 368. The problem with doctrine of basic structure was that Supreme Court failed to give a concrete shape, and they said it will be decided on case-to-case basis. Even in Keshwanand Bharti, individual judges, you will find suggested that this could be the feature of the Constitution, basic feature of the Constitution. They could have given a concrete shape to this doctrine of basic structure. This seems to be undemocratic. Parliament would not know that what part of the Constitution can be amended and what part of the Constitution cannot be amended. What part of the Constitution is basic structure and what part of the Constitution is not basic structure. And this problem with the basic structure doctrine, and on case-to-case basis, yes, you will find after Keshwanand Bharti, because this case evolved doctrine of basic structure, but this doctrine, we say that established by Supreme Court subsequent benches. It was reaffirmed in Indira Nehru Gandhi versus Rajnarayan. Immediately after Keshwanand Bharti case, you know the tussle which was going on. Emergency was imposed. Minerva Mills, Vaman Rao, and subsequent cases. But the other problem which I find with doctrine of basic structure is with the attitude of the Supreme Court, power-grabbing attitude of the Supreme Court, by which they can one by one, they can declare the whole Constitution as basic structure. So finally, they will say that there is nothing which is not a basic structure and government parliament cannot amend the Constitution at all. Sometimes we find this power-grabbing attitude of the Supreme Court, which is problematic. This power was basic structure doctrine was reaffirmed, I mentioned, in Indira Nehru Gandhi versus Rajnarayan, when appeal was pending during emergency. And you will find immediately after Golaknath judgment, the government was getting ready. किस लिए ready हो रही थी? Because government knew that Golaknath will create problems. Supreme Court is not going to be an easy task. And the government was very serious on the appointments of judges of the Supreme Court. Until 1970, you will find appointments were made by the government on the recommendations of the Chief Justice of India. Normal process. But after Golaknath judgment, you will find the entire trend was changed. The government now started hunting judges we call committed judges, loyal judges. After this confrontation in Golaknath case, R.C. Cooper case, Privy Purse case, and finally then, so before Keshwanand bench was constituted, the government made certain appointments in the Supreme Court. You know the history. After Keshwanand Bharti, 3 judges were superseded and number 4 was made the Chief Justice of India, who was part of the minority decisions in all the 3 cases which I mentioned: Golaknath, R.C. Cooper, Bank Nationalization case, and Privy Purse case, Madhavrao Scindia versus Union of India. Justice M.H. Beg, a very close friend of Gandhi family. And you will find that even after Keshwanand Bharti, an attempt was made by the Chief Justice of India, by Justice A.N. Ray, to review this basic structure doctrine. When this case was concluded, Indira Nehru Gandhi versus Raj Narayan, by the bench led by Justice A.N. Ray, though basic structure doctrine was affirmed, but Indira Gandhi was given clean sheet. The judgment of Allahabad High Court, Justice Jagmohan Lal Sinha was overturned. The judgment was reserved by the bench. And even before the judgment was delivered on 20th October 1975, Justice A.N. Ray issued a written order that the court would hear arguments on 10th November 1975 on 2 matters, on 2 questions. First, whether or not the basic structure doctrine restricted Parliament's power to amend the Constitution. And second, whether or not the bank nationalization case had been correctly decided. You know the process of review of a judgment in the Supreme Court. A review of an earlier judgment is ordered by court only after a judicial hearing by a bench which feels or which raises a doubt about the correctness of the verdict. But no such hearing has taken place about Keshwanand Bharti basic structure doctrine. But suo motu, Chief Justice has passed an order that we are going to review. And a bench of 13 judges were constituted because only 13-judge bench or a larger bench can reconsider the decision of a 13-judge bench. Everybody was surprised. Everybody was surprised. Mr. Palkiwala, the great lawyer who appeared, argued in Keshwanand Bharti against the government, against Advocate General of Maharashtra, H.M. Sirvai, who argued for the government. He in fact wrote a letter also that what is this, madam? What you are doing? If you want to give Parliament unlimited amending power, then this democracy, constitutional democracy, the unity and integrity of the country would vanish. And after her, there would be nobody to hold the entire country together. And he wrote that the basic structure doctrine of the Constitution was the real safeguards for the minorities. And with limitless amending power, the rule of law would disappear from the Constitution and Indian legal system. But in spite of all these efforts, the hearing, in-camera hearing, was started by Justice A.N. Ray, where Chief Justice of India is determined what can you do. He is the master of roster, as Justice Deepak Mishra did, Justice Kehar did, Justice Gogoi did. Palkiwala again appeared. And when this question was asked from the Chief Justice A.N. Ray, that there should be some problem, there should be some list dispute on which a bench is to be created. So can you precisely tell us what was the reason? Why this bench is constituted? Why this review is going to happen? Justice A.N. Ray did not have any concrete answers. So he said a general reply that many government have raised question on the correctness of basic structure doctrine. For example, he used and he took the name of government of Tamil Nadu without realizing that Advocate General of Tamil Nadu was also present in the court. And the Advocate General of the Tamil Nadu immediately denied in the court that, my lord, we have not made any such objection. We have not made any such request to review doctrine of basic structure. He lost the face. And finally, that day, the bench was dissolved by Justice A.N. Ray. And the basic structure doctrine survived. In many books, you will not find this story that how Supreme Court through Justice A.N. Ray tried to review Keshavanand Bharati judgment but could not succeed. Basic structure created a positive impact with certain difficulties, problems which I mentioned, that this brought a kind of uncertainty that government would not know that what part of the constitution is basic structure and what part of the constitution is not basic structure. In parliamentary democracy, this is the right, this is the domain of the legislature to decide what should be amended, what should not be amended, not the Supreme Court. But in my opinion, basic structure doctrine per se is a valid doctrine. It created a positive impact. And this fits into the larger scheme of constitutionalism, which says that all power should be limited. Parliament is also a creation of the constitution. So Parliament cannot claim that we have unlimited power to amend the constitution. No power. So when Article 368 power, Article 368 is not a constituent power in true sense. Constituent power is a sovereign power which was exercised by the Constituent Assembly. And that was dissolved in 1950 when they gave the constitution. What is given to Parliament under Article 368 is a residue of that constituent power. So that Parliament can time to time can make changes in the constitution, because constitution is not for one generation, it is for generations to come. I think I should stop. I have spoken enough. I have a meeting also 6:30.
Thank you, sir, for providing this detailed information about the history and brief history of the basic sector doctrine and the amending power of the constitution. With this, I would like to open the floor to the participants for questions. So, sir, we have some question I would like to pose them to you. Can Article 368 be amended? Can Article 368 be amended or constituted in such a way that state is able to claim unlimited authority?
Article 368 can be amended, and it was amended also, yes. 24th constitutional amendment was done to amend Article 368. But by using 368 amendment, you cannot provide unlimited absolute power. That's why that was the whole argument.
Thank you, sir. Sir,
You cannot create unlimited power by using your limited power.
Okay, sir. So next question is, if the words of Article 368 means this constitution, as you also highlighted, means the original drafted constitution drafted by the Constitutional Assembly, then how does it provide the textual basis for basic structure doctrine?
No, the argument that this constitution and this constitution shall stand amended means you can amend the constitution, you can modify the constitution, you can repeal certain provisions of the constitution if the situation demands, requires. But the residue which is left after doing all this exercise should be this constitution, which was the constitution which was drafted by Constituent Assembly. ये देखने के बाद हमें ये होना चाहिए ना कि ये वही कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है जो 1950 में बना था, इंप्लीमेंट हुआ था.
Okay, sir.
Shikhar, one question. Sir, what's your view on this thing, that 9th schedule and the doctrine of basic structure? So can you summarize it?
The 9th schedule was created for a very, very limited purpose. And this is the problem with the government, and this is the problem with the Supreme Court sometime also, that this is inherent problem of this power, the whole concept of power. 9th schedule was created only for a limited purpose, to bring agrarian reforms, because Supreme Court, and I hinted that the first amendment was passed only because of Supreme Court and High Courts. The land reform legislations were passed. Land is a state subject. Agrarian reforms we promised in the Constitution, in Directive Principles of State Policy, 39B and 39C of the Constitution. We cannot implement 39B and 39C unless we abolish Jamindari system. We cannot implement social and economic justice unless we abolish the Jamindari system. And if you abolish Jamindari system, people will approach court, because right to property was made fundamental right. This is another problem with the Constituent Assembly also, I find. In spite of knowing that we have to implement 39B and 39C, right to property was made fundamental right, because most of the members were Jamindars in the Constituent Assembly. Because of vested interest, 9th schedule was added with a good motive, good purpose, that we have to implement 39B, 39C of the Constitution, which is nevertheless fundamental in the governance. And if the High Court and Supreme Court could have done this harmonious construction, but the problem with the High Court and Supreme Court judges was also because they were also coming from elite class, जमींदार फैमिली. उस टाइम पे 1950s में तो हाई कोर्ट जज, सुप्रीम कोर्ट जज तो ऑर्डिनरी आदमी नहीं बन सकता. So they were also not convinced. They were more on fundamental right to property. So we cannot give effect to directive principles of state policy at the cost of fundamental right. And some of the laws were declared unconstitutional by the high courts. And the government was bound to amend constitution and add 9th schedule. But it was misused by the government. It was misused by the government. It has become a kind of reservoir of all illegal acts. आप कुछ भी पास कीजिए उसको डाल दीजिए 9th schedule में to avoid judicial review. But now Supreme Court has created some space in IR Coelho versus State of Tamil Nadu. You force your attitude, government's attitude sometimes forces Supreme Court to do what is not required to do. And finally, Supreme Court has to say, declare that, no, we can review the laws in 9th schedule also. Whether you can place a law, whether a law deserves to be placed in the 9th schedule or not, that we can definitely review.
Okay, sir. There's one question that about this 50% reservation, whether it is part of the basic structure or not. Your opinion, sir.
See, reservation is a very different question, complex question. I think that reservation should happen, and 50% reservation was a good device which was evolved by the Supreme Court in Balaji case, which was approved by Supreme Court in the Indira Sahni Mandal Commission case. We'll have some other day, because this will take some more time to explain.
Okay, sir.
I think that we cannot remove reservation altogether. Reservation is required. If we don't give reservation, we cannot implement certain parts of the preamble, certain part of directive principles of state policy. If we want to bring, but in the manner this reservation is being implemented, I have serious reservations.
Okay, sir. One day we will have a session on this.
The method in which the Supreme Court, this Indira Sahni case, gave 50% rule, and they said that creamy layer will be removed. How government is removing creamy layer? Why creamy layer is being not removed from SC and STs? Why benefits of SC, ST reservation, OBC reservations are taken only by the class which is already affluent among the OBC, SC, ST? So there are serious problems in the manner in which reservation is being implemented. But the problem is that who is going to debate? RSS chief ने एक बार बोल दिया बिहार इलेक्शन में जाके कहीं पे कि we should discuss reservation policy. उनका कहने का पर्पस ये नहीं था कि we should end reservation policy. We should review, we should discuss, debate, so that we can improve. Government चली गई, हार गई election, BJP. So nobody is ready to discuss reservation. But we can discuss.
Yes.
We are part of academics and we should.
Yes, sir. We will discuss it someday, sir.
Just a last question.
Okay.
Is there Section 6A of Gujarat New Freedom of Religion Amendment Bill puts a burden on the accused? Does it is violative of basic structure of the Constitution or not? If yes, then how? And if no, and then how?
I have not seen this. What is this section? But generally, basic structure doctrine is applicable in case of constitutional amendment acts.
Yes.
The Supreme Court has also made it clear that basic structure doctrine is not for ordinary legislation. So any law passed by parliament, ordinary law, or by state legislature cannot affect, you cannot challenge on the ground that this violates basic structure of the Constitution.
Okay.
So first you see, I have not seen Section 6. What does it provide and what are the contents of? But there are cases where even ordinary law people have challenged, and on the ground, one of the ground contention was that this violates basic structure of the Constitution.
Okay.
But this doctrine is primarily for amendment, Constitutional Amendment Act.
Okay. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Thank you
Because
so
you
much.
have to go for a meeting at 6:30. So I would like to thank all the participants. So we have the participants from across India. So some people are advocates and most of the students. So we have a good participation from across India. So that's a good thing. So
Good.
and once again, sir, thanks a lot. And so we would like to have a session on this reservation.
We'll do it. Yes.
Thank you so much,
ठीक है,
sir,
sir.
for this.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, on
Thank you,
behalf
sir.
of Society for Constitutional Law and Human Rights. Thank you to all the
Thank
participants
you
for
very
joining
much.
this
Thank you
session.
very much.
Thank you, sir.